Blueface just broke the internet. And not with a song, not with a stunt, but with a sentence so cold it froze the timeline. A pregnancy claim. Again. And this time his response didn't just shock people. It divided them. If you thought you'd seen it all, think again. This is Hood Files, where secrets explode before your eyes. Because within minutes, screenshots were flying, blogs were refreshing like it was a fire drill, and group chats were lighting up with one question. Did he really just say that? A baby claim tied to Nevaeh Akira. A denial that felt less like confusion and more like dismissal. And then the name dropped that flipped everything upside down. Pooh Shiesty. Was it deflection? Was it damage control? Or was it the calm before something much uglier? Fans split overnight. Some called it trolling. Others swore they'd seen the receipts. And one icy response turned into gasoline on a fire that was already burning. If you were in this position, same pressure, same betrayal, same public heat, what would you do? Speak up? Stay silent? Or let the chaos do the talking? Because the internet couldn't believe it. And trust me, you won't either. Let's break it all down. And yeah, it gets uglier. It didn't start with an announcement. It never does. Stories like this never walk into the front door. They slip in quietly, disguised as a rumor, wrapped in a screenshot, passed around in group chats before anyone realizes they're already standing in the middle of a fire. When the first pregnancy claim surfaced, most people brushed it off. Again, that was the reaction. Not shock, not disbelief, fatigue. Because by now, the internet had been trained to expect chaos on schedule. But this time, something felt different. Not louder, not messier, colder. The situation around Blueface had always lived in cycles. Public affection followed by public tension. Silence followed by sudden explosions. Moments that looked like closure until they weren't. Fans had learned to recognize the pattern. So when whispers about another pregnancy began circulating, the initial response wasn't outrage. It was skepticism. People waited. They watched. They scrolled. Because experience had taught them that the real story wouldn't be the claim itself, but how it was handled. That's where Nevaeh Akira entered the frame. To some, she was already a familiar name. To others, she was a new variable in an old equation. But the moment her name was attached to the claim, timelines shifted. Past clips resurfaced. Old interactions were re-examined. Casual comment from months ago were suddenly treated like foreshadowing. People started connecting dots that may or may not have ever been meant to connect. The claim itself wasn't dramatic in delivery. There was no emotional live stream, no carefully worded statement, just a quiet assertion dropped into an already tense atmosphere. That subtlety made it worse. It didn't demand attention. It assumed it, and the internet gave it exactly that. At first, reactions were split down the middle. Some fans offended her immediately, arguing that no one would joke about something like that in public. Others rolled their eyes, convinced this was another attempt to stay relevant in a storyline that had already exhausted its audience. Both sides were loud. Both sides were confident. And neither side had proof. Then came the waiting. Because in situations like this, the response is the real headline. People weren't refreshing blogs for updates from her. They were waiting on him, waiting to see how Blueface would react. Would he deny it, ignore it, joke about it, or confirm it? The silence stretched just long enough to make people uncomfortable, long enough for speculation to turn into expectation. When the response finally came, it wasn't what anyone predicted. There was no emotion in it, no anger, no confusion, no attempt to soften the message. Just a short, dismissive statement that landed with the emotional weight of a slammed door. It wasn't just a denial. It was a rejection of the entire premise. And the way it was delivered made it feel intentional. That single moment shifted everything. Because suddenly, the conversation wasn't about whether the pregnancy claim was real. It was about tone, about attitude, about what it meant to respond that way in public. Fans replayed the wording over and over, dissecting each phrase like it was testimony. Reaction channels paused, rewound, and paused again. Listen to how he says it. One creator insisted, "That's not surprise. That's distance." Old footage started circulating within minutes. Clips where he'd laughed off serious topics. interviews where he deflected responsibility with sarcasm. Moments that once felt forgettable now look suspicious. The internet does this well. It rewrites history in real time. The narrative began to expand. This wasn't framed as a misunderstanding anymore. It was framed as a pattern. People started asking questions that had nothing to do with the pregnancy itself. Questions about respect, about accountability, about whether this was just another example of chaos being treated like content. The claim had opened a door, and behind it was years of unresolved tension. Then came the screenshots, not confirmed, not verified, but compelling enough to spread. Alleged DMs, crop messages, partial conversations with no timestamps. Accounts claiming they were close to the situation began posting threads that mixed truth with speculation so seamlessly that it became impossible to tell where one ended and the other began. And as always, the faster something spread, the less anyone cared whether it was real. Some of those messages painted a picture of behind-the-scenes frustration, arguments about trust, accusations of manipulation, late-night conversations that allegedly ended with block numbers and deleted chats. None of it could be proven. All of it felt believable enough to fuel the fire. Fans split into camps overnight. One side insisted this was a calculated move, that the cold response was strategic, that denying the claim publicly was about control, not truth. The other side argued the opposite, that the dismissal proved the claim was false, that people were projecting meaning onto something that didn't deserve it. Comment sections turned into war zones. Every post was flooded with the same arguments repeated in different words. And then, quietly, another detail started circulating. A name, not dropped loudly, not emphasized, just mentioned, almost casually. But once people noticed it, they couldn't stop noticing it. Screenshots were re-examined. Timelines were adjusted. Fans began connecting a new set of dots, this time leading away from Blueface entirely. The implication wasn't stated outright. It didn't have to be. The internet understands subtext better than facts. The tension shifted again. Now, the conversation wasn't just about denial. It was about redirection, about whether the response was pushing attention somewhere else on purpose, about whether the story was being reframed in real time. Reaction channels hesitated, then leaned in harder, because when a narrative starts mutating this fast, something usually breaks. Behind all of it, the energy felt heavier, less playful, less performative. Even the memes felt sharper. Sarcasm replaced humor. Jokes landed with an edge. People weren't laughing as much as they were arguing. And that's when longtime observers realized something important. This wasn't entertainment anymore. This was escalation. Because when a situation reaches this point, when claims turn into patterns and reactions turn into evidence, the next phase is inevitable. Someone responds. Someone leaks something. Someone breaks silence again. And whatever comes next usually changes how the entire story is remembered. But what came next, even his enemies didn't expect. The moment that name began circulating, the entire temperature of the conversation changed. What had started as a familiar cycle of claim and denial suddenly felt like something sharper, more calculated. Because once Pooh Shiesty was even loosely connected to the narrative, the internet stopped arguing about tone and started arguing about intent. This wasn't just drama anymore. This was implication. And implication is where stories like this either collapse or explode. The reaction was immediate. Blogs updated their headlines mid-post. Reaction channels scrapped their drafts and started over. Comment sections flooded with the same question phrased 1,000 different ways. Why bring another name into it at all? Was it a joke, a distraction, or a message meant for someone specific? No one knew, but everyone had an opinion. Screenshots multiplied. Alleged messages surfaced claiming that conversations had been happening long before the public ever knew. Some accounts swore there were private disagreements about loyalty. Others hinted at overlapping timelines, late-night studio sessions, and energy shifts that only insiders would recognize. None of it came with proof. All of it came with confidence. And on the internet, confidence often passes for credibility. The blogs didn't slow down. They leaned in. Anonymous sources close to the situation began appearing in write-ups. each one painting a slightly different version of the same story. One article claimed the denial wasn't about truth at all, but about image control. Another suggested the entire situation was a response to something that happened off-camera weeks earlier. A third implied that the public was only seeing the surface of a much deeper conflict. And then came the alleged DMs. Blurry screenshots of conversations that supposedly took place late at night began circulating across platforms. The messages hinted at tension, sarcasm, and frustration. Short replies, delayed responses, lines that could be interpreted a dozen different ways depending on who was reading them. Fans analyzed punctuation like it was forensic evidence. Look at the timestamp. One comment read, "That's when everything went left." As always, the lack of confirmation didn't slow the spread. It accelerated it. Reaction channels played the images on screen with disclaimers, while still dissecting every word. "We can't verify this," they'd say, before spending 10 minutes explaining why it felt real. And the audience followed along, half skeptical, fully invested. Meanwhile, Blueface remained unmoved in public. No clarification, no follow-up, no attempt to soften the blow. That silence became its own statement. Because in internet culture, silence after escalation doesn't read as neutrality. It reads as confirmation, denial, or strategy, depending on who you ask. The focus shifted again, this time toward motive. Some fans argued that redirecting attention was the goal, that introducing another name into the conversation was a way to destabilize the narrative and regain control. Others believed it was less calculated and more reactive, a defensive move made without considering the fallout. Both interpretations gained traction. Neither could be proven, and that uncertainty kept the story alive. Memes exploded across timelines. Edited clips, sarcastic captions, exaggerated reenactments. Humor became a coping mechanism for a situation that was starting to feel uncomfortable, because nothing clears up confusion like adding another suspect. One viral post joked. It racked up thousands of likes within hours. But beneath the jokes, something darker was forming. People began revisiting older moments with new eyes. Old interviews where jokes landed a little too close to reality. Lyrics that suddenly felt like commentary. Casual remarks that now sounded like foreshadowing. The internet does this relentlessly. It turns coincidence into conspiracy and repetition into proof. At the same time, inner circle reactions started leaking out. Followers noticed subtle changes, likes disappearing, comments quietly removed. Friends who had once been vocal suddenly went silent. Others unfollowed entirely. Small details, easy to miss, except this audience missed nothing. Someone compiled a timeline of unfollows and deletions. It went viral overnight. Speculation escalated into theory. Some claimed this was all part of a rollout, a distraction designed to dominate conversation, while something else happened behind the scenes. Others dismissed that idea entirely, arguing that no one would risk this kind of backlash intentionally. The debate itself became the content. Truth was secondary. Engagement was everything. And then, unexpectedly, Nevaeh Akira became the center of gravity again. Not through a statement, not through a post, through absence. Her silence was louder than anything that had been said so far. Fans dissected her last appearance, her last caption, her last interaction. Was she being advised to stay quiet? Was she preparing to respond? Or was a lack of response the response? Accounts claiming to be close to her side began posting vague messages. The truth always comes out. Y'all don't know half of it. Nothing concrete. Everything suggestive. Enough to keep people watching. Enough to make the situation feel unresolved. The energy online shifted from shock to judgment. Comment sections stopped asking questions and started making declarations. We've seen this before. Same cycle, different names. At some point, patterns stopped being coincidences. Others pushed back hard, accusing critics of projecting and piling on without facts. The divide deepened, and once a divide hardens, reconciliation becomes impossible. Behind the scenes, rumors of damage control began circulating. Anonymous posts claimed meetings were happening, that advisors were urging restraint, that certain platforms were being avoided deliberately. Some even suggested legal conversations had started. No evidence, just implication. But implication was enough. The situation was no longer contained. Every unrelated post was flooded with comments demanding answers. Every silence was treated as confirmation of guilt. Even jokes were scrutinized, especially jokes, because sarcasm, in moments like this, doesn't read as humor. It reads as indifference. Then came the moment that shifted everything again. A short clip began circulating. Not new, not explosive on its own, but when paired with the current narrative, it hit differently. People replayed it, slowed it down, added captions, drew conclusions. Reaction channels labeled it the missing piece. Others called it a reach. But once it was out there, it couldn't be unseen. The story widened beyond individuals and into environment. Fans started asking uncomfortable questions about who benefited from the chaos, who stayed quiet when they could have spoken up, who encouraged the spectacle while pretending to be surprised by it. The idea that this wasn't just personal drama, but a system that thrived on attention, began gaining traction. And just when it felt like the internet had mapped out every angle, another whisper surfaced, another alleged detail, another suggestion that what people were arguing about publicly was only a fraction of what was happening privately. Because this wasn't just about a claim anymore, it was about fallout, and what followed would turn reaction into consequence in ways no one was ready for. By the time the fallout truly set in, the internet had already moved past curiosity and straight into judgment. That's always the final phase. First comes shock, then speculation, and finally, the verdict. Delivered confidently by people who don't have the full story but feel like they've seen enough. Comment sections stopped asking what happened and started declaring what it meant. Sides were locked in. And whatever the truth was, it was already buried under opinion. What made this stage different was the weight of it. The energy shifted. The chaos that once felt entertaining now felt exhausting. Longtime followers noticed it immediately. Fewer jokes, shorter responses, a tone that felt less like trolling and more like irritation. The drama hadn't exploded again. It had settled into something heavier, something that lingered. That's when the conversation turned toward consequences. People began talking less about the pregnancy claim itself and more about what the situation represented, about how moments like this stack up over time, about how repeated public conflicts change perception in ways that no explanation can undo. Some fans argued that this was simply the cost of living publicly. Others pushed back, saying there's a difference between transparency and spectacle. The debate wasn't just about individuals anymore. It was about boundaries. Behind the scenes, whispers of damage control grew louder. Anonymous accounts claimed meetings were happening away from cameras, that advisors were stepping in, that certain people were being told to stop posting, stop reacting, stop fueling the fire. There were even rumors of legal conversations, not lawsuits, not charges, just quiet consultations, the kind that signal someone is thinking long-term instead of viral. Whether any of it was true didn't matter. The idea alone shifted how people watched the situation. At the same time, attention began to drift, not away, but outward. Fans started connecting this moment to past incidents, framing it as another chapter in a much longer story. Old clips resurfaced again, this time with captions like "This aged badly," and "We should have seen this coming." Statements from years ago were reinterpreted as warnings. Jokes were reframed as confessions. The internet has a way of retrofitting meaning once a narrative feels complete. But here's the thing, it wasn't complete. There was no dramatic confession, no explosive live stream, no emotional apology that reset the board. Instead, there was distance, a noticeable pullback. Posts slowed, interactions thinned, the constant noise dropped to a low hum, and that silence, uncomfortable as it was, said more than any statement could have. Some insiders claim relationships have been strained beyond repair. That trust, once broken publicly, doesn't rebuild quietly. Others believe this was just another pause, another calm before the cycle restarted. Because that's what cycles do. They don't end. They repeat until someone steps off the ride. The audience waited. Days passed, then more days. Every unrelated post was flooded with the same comments. Address it. Say something. We deserve answers. As if attention granted ownership. as if watching something unfold gives the viewer the right to control the ending. But the ending never came, and that's when discomfort set in, because internet culture is built on resolution, on updates, on arcs that conclude neatly. The situation refused to do that. It lingered unresolved, a loose thread hanging over every future interaction. And unresolved stories don't fade, they resurface. They get referenced, they get weaponized, and next time something even remotely similar happens. This is how it started last time, people would say, and maybe that's the real damage. Not the headlines, not the memes, not even the accusations. It's the way moments like this become shorthand for everything that follows. The way one cold response can echo longer than intended. The way silence gets remembered as a choice, not an absence. The way reputations shift slowly, then all at once. Eventually, the algorithm moved on. It always does. New scandals replaced old ones. New names trended. New chaos took center stage. But the impact of the situation didn't disappear with the headlines. It stayed embedded in the narrative, a reference point waiting to be activated again. Because screenshots don't expire, old words don't age well. And the internet never forgets who said what when the pressure was on. What started as a claim turned into a mirror, reflecting patterns people had ignored, highlighting dynamics that had gone unchecked, exposing how quickly personal moments become public currency once attention is involved. And the most unsettling part? There was no villain monologue, no hero moment, no clear winner, just distance, just silence, just the uncomfortable realization that sometimes the loudest statement isn't what gets said, it's what never does. That's where the story leaves us, not with closure, not with certainty, but with questions that refuse to go away. Was this calculated? Another moment designed to stir the internet and keep the spotlight burning? Or did that cold response reveal something deeper, something people weren't supposed to notice but did anyway? Because situations like this don't end. They pause, they wait, they come back louder when people least expect it. And if there's one thing the internet has proven over and over again, it's this. Unresolved stories don't disappear. They resurface, sharper, messier, and harder to control. So now it's on you. What do you think really happened here? Was this manipulation, exhaustion, or something in between? Drop your thoughts in the comments. No filters, no fake outrage. Say what you actually think. And if you've been rocking with Hood Files, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Because we don't chase headlines, we break down what they don't want you to question. Like the video if this breakdown made you see the situation differently. Share it if you know someone who's been arguing about this nonstop in group chats. Stay locked in, because if another clip drops, if another name gets pulled into the fallout, if the story resurfaces, and it probably will, we'll be right here, breaking it down frame by frame. This isn't gossip. This is how internet scandals are built and how they collapse. What do you think happens next? Backhand index pointing down. So now the question isn't what happened, it's what happens next. Because stories like this don't just disappear. They sit, they simmer, and the moment everyone thinks it's over, they come back louder, messier, and harder to control. Screenshots don't expire. Old words don't age well. And the internet never forgets who stayed silent when the pressure was on. That's why this moment matters. Was this a calculated move designed to hijack attention and flip the narrative? Was it emotional exhaustion finally spilling into public view? Or was that cold response the clearest signal, yet that this story was never about a baby at all, but about control? If you were in this position, same spotlight, same accusations, same chaos, what would you do? Clap back and fuel the fire? Disappear and let the internet write the ending for you? Or wait it out and hope people move on? Drop your real thoughts in the comments. No fake outrage. No bandwagon takes. Say what you actually think happened here, because this conversation is far from over, and the comment section is where the real verdict gets written. And if you're rocking with Hood Files, make sure you hit that subscribe button right now. We don't chase headlines. We break down what they don't want you to question. Like the video if this breakdown made you see the situation differently. Share it with someone who's been arguing about this nonstop in group chats. Stay locked in, because if another clip drops, if another name gets pulled into the fallout, if the story resurfaces, and history says it will. We'll be right here, breaking it down frame by frame. This isn't gossip. This is how internet scandals are built and how they collapse. What do you think happens next? Backhand index pointing down.